Meet the enemy where he is. Find him in his moment of weakness and make him suffer for it. Speed is the greatest advantage you can possess. For the most powerful warrior is still less than a man if the warrior lives behind walls, while the man rushes forward. Rush forward, my sons, when your allies are in need of you, or when your enemy has made a grave mistake. When you think about war, do you think about motorcycles? When you think about war, do you think about long, flowing facial hair? And when you think about war, do you think about insulting your enemy directly to his face while he's still in the process of trying to kill you? You probably answered no to one, if not all of those. And that's why I'm here to explain to you all about a man named Jaghatai Khan. Mr. Khan is the Primarch of the White Scars, a Space Marine Legion known for, if they're known for anything, going fast and beheading their enemies to take as trophies. And their Primarch is all about this too. But the Blood God won't be giving them any calls anytime soon because the Khan is more savvy and somehow more ruthless than he might let on. We'll see all of that in fun detail as we follow Jaghatai's jazzy journey through the universe of 40K. To begin with, after the interdimensional and transgalactic pinball game known as the Scattering of the Primarchs, Jaghatai Khan landed on the world of Mundus Planus. But that was a very lame name, so the natives of the planet renamed it Chogoris, once they had all that unwelcome sovereignty brought about by the birth of Slaanesh. Luckily, the planet had been able to sidestep that little indescribably massive cataclysm by being mostly self-sufficient. They weren't able to maintain high technology. As a matter of fact, by the time the Khan landed on the scene, they were back to a level of pike and shot. But Chogoris was a fertile world. So, unlike the barren mining colonies where the only long-term sustenance the workers had was the other workers, Chogoris could grow its own food. And there was only one significant problem with the place. On Chogoris' sole continent, there was a space known as the Big Empty. The Empty Quarter. A massive, sweeping plains which, while beautiful, were low in natural resources and not ideal for farming. The only inhabitants of this sector were a number of vicious and horsebound nomadic tribes who found themselves in the unenviable position of being captured as slaves or just killed for fun by the much more powerful feudal aristocracy. With their arquebuses. They were a united empire following some brain trust leader known as the Palatine. But it was among the horse tribes of the Empty where Baba Jaghatai would make planetfall. Immediately, a group of tribesmen would head for the site of the impact of this thing falling from space, and when they found a baby sitting in the crater, they proclaim it to be a gift from the gods. I mean, who wouldn't? This tribe was known as the Talaskars, with their chieftain Oneg Khan. He found the child, held it in his arms, and even as a baby he could see there was fire in Jaghatai's eyes. Then Oneg looked up and said, "This is my son now." And little Jaghatai grew up to be loved by a few and hated by many. Of his own tribe he was loved. By all accounts I've seen, Jaghatai got on swell with his adopted father and the extended family. It was the other tribes of the Empty Quarter that didn't like him. Because when you're a warring band of tribes, and one tribe has a 10-foot-tall demi-god that can't even be hurt by advanced space-age weapons, that's not just rigging the game. That's shooting the dealer and robbing the casino. But it wasn't just Jaghatai's skill in battle that earned him the ire of other tribes, though that did have a lot to do with it. He also had grand designs for the horse tribes. He looked beyond the immediate future with a plan to bring everyone together and push back against the Palatine. Needless to say that when you spent your whole existence as a plains nomad, unity doesn't come naturally to you. As a matter of fact, one tribe called the Kuryade took such exception to the idea that they decided, and did, slay Jaghatai's adopted father Oneg. And Jaghatai was a little upset by this. But he didn't let it mature into rage as he made a level-headed plan. All he did was very simply lead his tribe into battle, slaughter the Kuryade down to the women and children, decapitate the leader of the tribe, and then mount the head on a spike in front of his tent. Just as you do. But this would be the last serious time the Khan led a battle against another tribe, as he began bringing them all together in the empty quarter. Though it was more absorbing than unifying, the traditions of other tribes got demolished, no questions asked, and military service was mandatory. However, rarely was this a violent process, as Jaghatai inspired fierce loyalty from all that followed him. He ran a disciplined horse army promoting on merit and time served. These would really come to embody what Jaghatai Khan was all about. Number 1, the aforementioned loyalty working from both leaders and the led. Second, a strong sense of honor to his ideals. And third, of course, being absolutely ruthless. It was a strong campaign platform, and in something like 10 years, the Khan had brought together all the tribes and all their horses. The Palatine, of course, took notice and sent out an envoy to meet the Khan, looking to negotiate an immediate removal of Jaghatai's head from his shoulders. And they would catch up with him later that winter. While Jaghatai and a small group were traversing a mountain pass, they were struck by an avalanche which Jaghatai alone survived. However, he was washed down the mountain and couldn't hope to make it back up before the rest of his tribe moved on. So, for all intents and purposes, he was completely alone. And it was in these most ideal of circumstances the Palatine's envoy found him. Some 15 warriors on horseback, led by the Palatine's own son. Sometime later, the envoy returned to the capital city. It consisted of one rider, who had been mutilated in battle, carrying a package and a note. The note was written for the Palatine by Jaghatai, saying that the people of the empty quarter were no longer his toys. And the package was the head of the Palatine's son. And here we reach the secret fourth trait of the Khan. If you're going to step up to him, you be prepared to step back down. Unfortunately, our friend the Palatine hadn't learned this yet, and he was very peeved about Jaghatai turning his son into a very literal headless horseman. So, he assembled the biggest army he could muster, which, as the leader of the planet, he could muster up a pretty big army. Many thousands upon thousands of troops, highly disciplined, heavily armored, with state-of-the-art arquebuses. More men and better equipment than Jaghatai could ever hope to go up against. So, he just didn't. Instead, Jaghatai turned his weakness into a strength by using lightly armored cavalry to lead the Palatine on a merry chase. The heavy infantry couldn't hope to keep up with the tribesmen, leaving them vulnerable to hails of arrows from horseback archers, or lightning-fast hit-and-run raids, or just flat-out exhaustion trying to follow an enemy who never stopped moving. Until, at the army's lowest point, the tribesmen launched an all-out assault, massacring the enemy troops so completely that only the Palatine and his elite bodyguard were able to escape. Then, as the Palatine retreated, he looked up to the mountains, and there was Jaghatai at one of the peaks. And he struck a pose. That's not true, but I can pretend. What is real is that Jaghatai didn't pause even for a moment. He'd just won a war with the largest army the planet could field. Most, if not all, the best trained and equipped soldiers on the planet were dead, while his tribesmen were still very much alive. it doesn't take a great military mind to spot an opportunity for a counteroffensive. So, Jaghatai got his band together and went on a planet-wide tour of all the major cities, performing his 3-word song, Surrender or Die. Needless to say, it immediately rose to the top of the charts, as any city that went against the song was immediately wiped off the face of Chogoris. From city to city they went until they reached the capital and the Palace of the Palatine, where Jaghatai released a new one-time single. Instead of razing the city to the ground, Jaghatai made the people a special one-time offer. If they could bring him, the head of the Palatine, he'd be happy. And if they didn't, he'd be very unhappy. They didn't even need a full day to think about it. And in his traditional fashion, Jaghatai mounted the head on a spike in front of his tent. At last, he had taken over the planet in the name of his tribe. And what came next was the scariest time of Jaghatai Khan's life. The one thing Jaghatai feared before anything else was growing soft. With no one left who could hope to oppose him, he worried that he could grow complacent, hiding behind the high walls of the palace. Luckily, this time of life was very brief, as this guy showed up. When the Emperor, Master of Mankind, John 40K himself arrived on the scene, Jaghatai was both quick and hesitant to join up. Quick because the Emperor promised a glorious and potentially eternal crusade across the stars, both of which suited Jaghatai more than all right. But he was still hesitant because, odd as it may sound, Jaghatai didn't like the term emperor. It implied ruling from a guarded palace, and maybe even, perish the thought, sitting on a throne? But, still, the Big E seemed to have his act together, so Jaghatai signed on willingly to the Great Crusade. Here I can get into Jaghatai's relationship with his brothers, which in 2 words was not good. It wasn't bad either, but he didn't form many strong relationships among the other Primarchs. This won't come as any surprise for someone who's well known for riding a motorcycle and decapitating people, but Jaghatai was a bit of a loner, and even less surprising, a bit of a maverick. No incident proves these points more than when he went to the Mechanicum and said, "Hey, these starships you gave me are too slow. I hate it. I want you to refit all of them. Yes, all of them, so they can be the fastest and most agile warships in the galaxy." And the Mechanicum said, "Sure, we can do that." And then to compound things, the Khan and his tech marines refined the technology even more in secret. This is what led to the very famous exchange between Jaghatai and Fulgrim. Fulgrim said, "I heard you do strange things to your starships, Jaghatai." To which Jaghatai responded, "I heard you do strange things to your warriors." Then he struck a pose. Yeah, you thought before when I mentioned ruthless, you thought it was only in battle. But no! Jaghatai, all the time, ruthless. Gets on the jet bike, ruthless. Gets off the jet bike, ruthless. If you see Jaghatai Khan, you can be guaranteed of one word: ruthless. Besides Fulgrim, Jaghatai had a pretty strained relationship with Dorn, for obvious reasons, and Rowboat Guillotine, because Gilliman was a bit too straight-laced for the Khan. But this was all in doctrine. They really didn't have anything against each other personally. On the other hand, Jaghatai was very friendly with a few of his brothers, first among them being Horus. For those of you still new here, this might be a bit concerning, but it's really nothing to worry about. Another reason Horus was the most powerful of all the Primarchs was because he was the most charismatic, and by extension, the most popular. Also, the Sons of Horus and the White Scars being assault troops meant that they had a lot to talk about. And another thing Jaghatai liked to talk about was Psychers. Something that didn't become relevant until this very paragraph was that Chogoris still had Psykers when Jaghatai arrived. They survived the turmoil of Slaaneish's birth and the purging of Psykers so common on many worlds during the Age of Strife by practicing moderation. They had a strong connection to the warp, but tempered it, only whipping it out in the most serious of situations. As a result, Jaghatai already knew about this stuff prior to the Emperor's arrival, and he was very pro-Psyker. This led him to become friends with Sanguinius and Magnus, and the three of them would work together to create the Astartes Librarius. This is a big compendium for each legion where all their knowledge and history is stored. It's also where Marine Psykers are trained and educated, hence why they're called librarians. This pro stance on Psykers would also make Jaghatai his one real enemy among the brothers, which was Mortarion. Early on, it was just another difference in doctrine, as one was tough but slow and the other was light but fast. But it grew deeper as Old Mort was about as deeply anti-Psyker as you can get.
Ironic.
Side note, when Jaghatai saw how much and how hard Magnus was learning about the warp, it concerned him a little bit. So he pulled him aside one day and said, "Hey man, I'm worried about you. You're getting a little bit too deep into this stuff. Our shamans called Stormseers on Chogoris always tried to keep this stuff pretty minimal, you know? So you can still do your psychic stuff, just maybe dial it back a bit, cause it's dangerous. You're at like a 9 right now, going up to an 11. Could you dial it back to like a 6? And Magnus said, okay. But then he didn't stop. Just another point that yes, indeed, Magnus absolutely did everything wrong. Which, of course, led him directly to the Council of Nicaea, where pretty much everyone told Magnus to go sit in the cuck chair. But Jaghatai wasn't one of those people, because he wasn't there. He was off in a far corner of the Empire on important crusading business. Business that would last through Horus's new plan for the Old Gods. So, as the heresy was getting into full swing, Jaghatai was caught unaware. Not getting ambushed, but getting conflicting information from all sides. It's established from the very beginning that no one knew which way Jaghatai would go when the Civil War began. Remember, he was mostly an outsider and cultivated a reputation as a bit of an unknown, which he would use to his advantage in duels and stuff. Only now, it was coming back to bite him as everyone started sending him reports. His buddy Horus is saying, "Come on over here, we're getting a hype train going, good times abound." Meanwhile, Dorn and Russ were screaming, "Horus went to Thrillville, cause he's gone off the rails. Get back to Terra, right fucking now." And in response to all of this, Jaghatai and the White Scars by extension took one massive step back and said, okay, what is actually going on here? It took them a while to get to grips with things, but 3 major events helped them understand. First, while going to talk to Horus, Jaghatai's fleet encountered another fleet of Alpha Legion giving them the silent treatment while also blocking their path forward. Unwilling to escalate things, Jaghatai just left them alone. So I guess Alpha Legion confirmed loyal because they helped the White Scars remain loyal by keeping them from talking to Horus? It doesn't matter. Next, Jaghatai diverted course and started heading for Prospero, where he'd heard about a bit of a misunderstanding between the Thousand Suns and the Space Wolves. He landed on the planet, saw the results of Lehman Russ's humanitarian mission, and was disgusted by what he saw. But by this point, Magnus had sworn his allegiance to Zeech, and it was clear that his loyalty to the Emperor had long gone. However, the real kicker was when Mortarion, fresh from his unexpected detour to meet Nurgle thanks to introductions made by Typhus, came down and tried to convince the Khan to side with Chaos. To which Jaghatai responded, "No, that's gross, you're gross. If you're trying to be friendly with me, then I know things are bad, and he'd officially declared his loyalty for the Emperor. From there, things only got more difficult for the White Scars. You see, this was after Istvan V, which for those of you unaware was called the Drop Site Massacre because the Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders got reduced from 80,000 Space Marines each down to 3,000. At the same time, the Ultramarines, Blood Angels, and Dark Angels were still being waylaid by a massive rune storm summoned by the Word Bearers. Also, the Space Wolves were dealing with the Alpha Legion paying them back for Prospero, and the Imperial Fists won't leave Terra. So, on one side we have the traitors comprised of the Emperor's Children, the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, World Eaters, Death Guard, Thousand Sons, Sons of Horus, Word Bearers, and their Primarchs, plus the entourage of demon groupies following them around thanks to their new Dark Overlords. And in the other corner, wearing white trunks, the mighty Jaghatai Khan, who has to pause briefly to put down a minor mutiny by some of his Marines who still want to join Horus. When it goes bad, it goes real bad. With Horus and his posse making the long march to Terra, Jaghatai and the White Scars start doing what they do best: hit and run tactics. They can't stop the warband, but they may slow it down and/or take a few valuable pieces from their fleet. And they do pretty well, all things considered. The Legion doesn't take heavy casualties, and at one point during a fighting retreat, Jaghatai is able to cut out the heart of a fucking Keeper of Secrets. That's pretty good. However, they're still not making the significant impact they wanted. As a matter of fact, all the other loyal Space Marine legions are rallying back to Terra because it's clear that's where everything is gonna go down. So, Jaghatai and company break off their attacks, searching for a way to beat the traitors back to Earth. And thanks to the Deus Ex Machina right next door, they're able to do just that. Literally, there's this thing called the Dark Glass, never mentioned before anywhere I can find it. The White Scars go through it, gain access to the webway, and basically just fast travel back to Terra. 40k writing at its peak, folks. Anyway, Jaghatai and the White Scars make it back to Terra and start gearing up for the siege. And when the battle breaks out, it is as big can be. Full budget, all the actors on stage, and everyone's going nuts, Coco Nuts. And the Scars are in the thick of it. But the real action would come at the Battle of Lion's Gate Spaceport. No relation to the actual lion. This spaceport was an #1 objective as a way to deny traitor reinforcements and bring in new loyalist troops down to the planet. And Jaghatai would lead this action himself, with some reports saying that he did this while standing on top of a Land Raider. I don't know if that's true, but I don't care. Even if it is a lie, I'm gonna keep retelling it. But wouldn't you know it, who's in control of the spaceport? It's the Death Guard, with Mortarion along with them. So, Jaghatai goes straight for Mort while his boys keep fighting the heretics, but the Khan is outmatched. Even though Jaghatai is getting in some good hits, Mort was a tough customer even before he went to space hell. Now he's damn near indestructible. However, this is where something interesting happens. Throughout their fight, Jaghatai is roasting Mort. Even as he starts losing the fight, he doesn't stop with the zingers. So Mort is stabbing Jaghatai in the chest, and Jaghatai's like, haha, what a pussy, you're stabbing me. Actually, paraphrased, I do have two specific remarks that Jaghatai made. First, he says that he would have thought that Typhus was the master of the Death Guard, as he was the one who brought the Legion to Nurgle under Mort's nose. And second, he says that even as Mort supplicated himself to the ruinous powers to become so much tougher, that he, Jaghatai, still had the superior endurance. However, Jaghatai wasn't just roasting for the sheer fun of it, though that was a nice bonus. Throughout the insults, Mort's temper is just getting hotter and hotter, until he fucks up. Mort telegraphs his next attack. Jaghatai sees it and gets the upper hand for an instant, but that's all he needs. He moves in, slices Mort's head clean off his shoulders, killing his mortal body and banishing him into the warp, effectively killing him for the time being. And then, broken and messed up from the fight, he struck a pose! And with the enemy Primarch vanquished, Jaghatai Khan collapsed. He's not dead, just very, very wounded. However, to the White Scar's legionaries fighting in the larger battle around him, it looks like the Khan has just died. And there's a bit of a precedent that when Astartes have, or worse still, witness their Primarch die, it makes them go a little insane. In the White Scar's case, they fly into a berserker-like rage by throwing themselves even deeper into battle. Couple this as the Death Guard are being thrown into disarray as their own Primarch was just banished back to the warp, and the Loyalists were able to seize the spaceport, along with it taking the spaceport's orbital defense batteries. And wouldn't you know it, there are a bunch of traitor warships in orbit directly overhead, sending down troops to the spaceport. I think you can guess what happened next. After the battle, it was discovered that the Khan was still alive, and he was medevaced first on the back of a Lehman Russ battle tank, then aboard a Thunderhawk gunship. He would go on to make a full recovery in the time after the siege, and the rest, as they say, is history. Following the end of the heresy, Jaghatai went back to being his same old self until one battle with the Dark Eldar. He and the White Scars were kicking ass until the Eldar fled into a webway portal. Jaghatai gave chase, the portal closed behind him, and so far that was that for Jaghatai. Presumably, he's still in there. It has been around 10,000 years, but remember, the webway is just a safer road in the warp, where time is a loose set of guidelines at best. And here we get to my ultimate hope for Jaghatai, where he finally makes it out of the warp. He looks around at the Imperium saying, What the fuck? What the fuck? I was only in there for 5 minutes! How did you people screw everything up so bad? Why are you worshipping Dad like a god? Guys, what the hell happened here? Along with all the other character development the Primarchs go through when they return in the 41st. Though, hopefully the Khan will maintain his wit. Because that is Jaghatai Khan, ladies and gentlemen. Warriors of Chogoris, brothers of the great tribe, the Star Hunt calls to you, do you not hear it? The battle's red edge is your home, the respect of your kinsmen, your hearth. Plunge into the enemy's breast like a blade, cut out his heart, and you will know fulfillment. The Emperor has given us strength. In return, we give him victory. Jaghatai Khan. Now it's time for me to let you in on a little something. I've always been divided between 3 Space Marine chapters on who is my most favorite. I can never decide. Until now, where I've made 3 videos on 3 key members of those chapters. And whichever one of those performs the best will break the tie forever. I look forward to seeing the results at the end of October. Thank you.